Well, he's the master. Step in time. It's Professor Jeffrey D. Sacs, Professor of Economics at Columbia University and a United Nations Policy Advisor. Professor Sacs, wonderful to finally meet you. As I said earlier, in this very studio, your picture adorns the door like one of these blue plaques. Jeffrey Sacs sat here. We are honoured for your presence. Can I start at home before we go abroad? The US economy is showing all the signs of potential catastrophe. Do you agree?
Well, it's very sick in a lot of ways, no doubt. We have massive budget deficits, as you know, about 7% of GDP. Trump is so erratic that your question of whether it's dementia, of course, is a very live and plausible explanation. We have thuggery, corruption, mismanagement. We also have a wild speculative bubble, obviously, in AI stocks. So, yes, a lot could go wrong. Will it go wrong? We should remember that back in 2008, when we had the financial crisis, it also depended on just about the stupidest action you could imagine by a Treasury Secretary or any senior official when our Treasury Secretary at the time, Hank Paulson, deliberately bankrupted one weekend Lehman Brothers. And that was a trigger that led to catastrophe. Well, we have a vicious guy as Treasury Secretary, so he's capable of all sorts of things. Whether he would be as stupid as Hank Paulson was back in 2008, that remains to be seen. But George, your discussion of how bad Keir Starmer is, it is an interesting question. Which country has the worst government? They're running perhaps neck and neck. Trump is crazy. Keir Starmer is beyond belief. Of course, that's the special relationship, I suppose. But it's unbelievable what we have for supposedly for governance these days. It's just completely shambolic collapse of the most minimal competence or minimal decency.
Well, I saw you opine on that, I think, today, and it's an opinion I have frequently expressed. I'm so old. I remember when, although adversaries of mine ideologically, politically, the Western world had big leaders. I mean, Germany even had a physical giant in Helmut Kohl for many years. So did France with Jacques Chirac, before him Mitterrand, before him distantly Charles de Gaulle himself. Britain, even though I hated her, had Margaret Thatcher. And even Tony Blair, who makes Keir Starmer look like a plank of wood, quite frankly. All the Western leaders got smaller, in many cases literally, in all cases metaphorically. What's the cause of that, Professor?
I can tell you in the U.S., the cause is that our political system became completely corrupted by money. That's part of it. And it became completely taken over by the military industrial digital complex. So on foreign policy, we're ruled now from Silicon Valley. And on any domestic issues, we're ruled by a small group of billionaires that are the ones that have paid for the most recent government. So you're able, therefore, to elect people who are so shockingly detestable, like Trump, so ignorant and so corrupt. But it's a money game. And Elon Musk, in this case, and friend Peter Thiel and others bought this past election. They own the White House right now. So this is what's happened on this side of the Atlantic. Frankly, what I see in Europe is hard to believe, because it wasn't so long ago that there were people, like you said, that one respected, talked to, didn't necessarily agree with, but they were substantial, very interesting people. I knew Helmut Kohl. I knew a number of these leaders from various economic activities that I was involved in and advising in Europe and so on. And they were real, substantial people. Now you just can't even talk to them, and they're so pathetic they don't answer a phone call. They don't want to discuss anything that's outside of a comfort zone. And so this is it's really amazing. And Europe is of course, falling to pieces in the process. It can't tell whether it's going to be invaded by the East or the West. It's guessed wrong. Russia's not its threat. The threat is the United States, which is the more imminent invasion that's likely. They lost all sense of diplomacy. They lost all sense of economics. If it wasn't enough that they had put sanctions on Russia, which didn't matter so much for Russia, but crushed the industry of Germany and Europe. Well, they had to put the cherry on top of that a couple of days ago by declaring that permanently they would stop any imports of energy from Russia and only buy LNG 6 times the cost from the United States. So these people don't even think for a moment about their own citizens or their own voters. And it's not surprising that Starmer has 11% approval ratings. I don't know who's lower. Macron is maybe in single digits by now. He's absolutely detested by the population. Merz is in a free fall. They all are not only pathetic from the point of view of Europe's interests, but they're not even decent politicians from the point of view of keeping any public support at all.
Might it be the death of ideology, Professor? It's certainly something I hope, because that's recoverable from. But when I entered Parliament in the 1980s, and I only left it a year ago or so, there were big people who had ideological moorings and therefore the ability to argue from a coherent set of values and beliefs. And the clash of those values, Mr. Benn versus Mrs. Thatcher, for example, was something to behold. And one felt that that person belonged to that school of thought and this person another school of thought. And they contended, and sometimes one prevailed, sometimes not. But the sense I have of Western politics now is that none of the players actually believe in anything.
It's so interesting. The one that we gave the most hope to and was, not a disaster in the same way that Trump is a disaster, but was a failure, was Obama. And it's interesting, I was just smitten with Obama during the campaign and thought, okay, we're finally getting the turnaround. And of course, there was nothing there afterwards. And he implemented the normal deep state policies of overthrowing governments and tasking the CIA with overthrowing the Syrian government and many, many disasters in his term. But what was interesting with regard to what you've just said, there was a book written by his campaign manager, David Plouffe, describing the victory that Obama won in 2008. I think it's called The Audacity to Win. I don't remember. It's a while ago. But the interesting thing about the book was it was 100% tactics of the election without one paragraph that had any sense about why the guy would actually want to govern, what he stood for. It was all about whether Oprah would campaign in this way, what they should say at this moment, what they should say about that moment. Well, okay, they won the presidency, but there was absolutely nothing there after that. And so this is the sense in which these people come out of nowhere. They're backed by whoever they're backed. And then, like you say, they have no substance at all. And what we watched, my wife and I often refer to a wonderful documentary biography of Gore Vidal, the great and very witty social commentator and novelist and public intellectual of the United States. And he happened to be filmed the night that Obama won the election. And he was in his villa because he was in self-imposed exile from the United States, living in Italy. And he's in his villa and the camera's running and the screen announces that Obama has been elected. And he shows no emotion. And so the interviewer says to him, Mr. Vidal, aren't you happy that Obama's elected? And he says, look, by the time you're elected president, you've sold your soul 10 times over. So this is completely meaningless. And this was basically the one sentence explanation that it didn't matter. It didn't matter at all. It didn't change the course of America one iota. It didn't change deep state policy. It didn't change the military industrial complex. It didn't change the shenanigans of the CIA. It didn't prevent the CIA role in the Maidan coup in February 2014 that put us on the road to war with Ukraine. It didn't prevent the CIA machinations in Syria that led to 14 years of this brutal covert war that the United States started at Israel's behest in 2011. So, yeah, it doesn't matter. That's the tragedy. We have on paper a constitutional system. It doesn't actually function anymore, but it still is there on paper.
We will come back to some of those, if you'll permit us. But being a Roman Catholic of Irish origin myself, I frequently cast my mind back. I'm with Bob Dylan. I think that that murder most foul in 1963 was kind of the beginning of the end of America. It was, I see videos, grainy, black and white videos now, of Kennedy on the Middle East, of Kennedy on Iran. I watched one today where he says that we should have thrown ourselves all in to defend Mossadegh in Iran from the CIA, MI6, and other malign forces who destroyed democracy in Iran, because the elected prime minister had the weird idea that Iranian oil belonged to the people of Iran. The more I think of Jack Kennedy and the more I look at this unhinged Donald Trump, I realize in a way that's a metaphor for how far we've fallen.
It's exactly right, George. I wrote a book about Kennedy's last year because I think Kennedy's year from the Cuban Missile Crisis to his assassination was a year of the greatest statesmanship that the United States had since Franklin Roosevelt. And Kennedy was on his way to becoming the great leader of our age. And it was for that reason he was killed, almost surely by CIA forces and those together with them. And James Angleton looms very large as the likely culprit who planted the whole episode. There's no doubt that it's that time, that moment, that America changed. And it's probably from that moment that no president, even if they had the druthers to do something different, would do something different, because they see what it would actually mean. Eisenhower told us all of this very explicitly. It's mind-boggling, actually, to go back to read the famous Eisenhower farewell address, which was January 17th, 1961, just 3 days before the end of Eisenhower's presidency. And that's the famous speech where Eisenhower says that we're threatened by the military-industrial complex. What strikes me about that speech is not only how prescient it was, but this was given by a general, not only a president, but the supreme Allied commander. And he was warning the American people, warning them about what the military meant for their democracy. He knew. And I think when Kennedy was assassinated, Truman wrote quickly afterwards that his biggest mistake was to have signed the 1947 National Security Act, which created the CIA in part as a secret army of the United States. And I'm quite convinced that Truman knew that Kennedy had fallen in a coup, not in the ridiculous story of a lone assassin. Recently, George, I've been reading incredible history documents of Olof Palme's assassination in Sweden, and it's basically the same story. I think it's almost undoubted that Olof Palme was killed in an intelligence conspiracy that involved the United States, the UK, MI6, and Swedish intelligence, so that it was an inside job. And the documentation is shocking in this regard, as was the failure to have any serious investigation, obviously, so it was a cover-up. But what struck me that I hadn't really fully internalized until reading these documents recently is how much Sweden changed exactly in the same way. And what I mean by that is when I was a young student, I loved Swedish social democracy. You know, this was amazing to me. The idea, and it was just breathtaking how Sweden was exploring novel approaches to ownership and worker ownership and the Meidner Plan. And there were many exciting things in the 1970s that I was enthralled with as a young economist in training. And then it all stopped in the 1990s. And it was the death of Olof Palme that stopped everything. And so these end up not being simply assassinations. They are fundamental turns of government. One could say the same about Yitzhak Rabin's murder. That was the last chance of even the most minimal decency by Israel with regard to the Palestinians, because after Yitzhak Rabin's murder, Israel became a genocidal society. And it is openly practiced its genocide in Gaza in the last couple of years. So Kennedy's assassination, Palmer's assassination, Yitzhak Rabin's assassination, these change history. It's not only the individual tragedies and the shock, but it's what it means inside the politics of these societies. These are coups that change regimes, basically. And this is what we're living with right now.
I could spend all day discussing these deeper and historical matters with you, but time is against us, so we have to get through several other topics, Professor. Forgive me. The proximate crisis is the one in the Persian Gulf, where a beautiful armada, in the words of Donald Trump, is steaming full speed ahead into what might be a cataclysmic war, or might be the comparatively bloodless, relatively bloodless decapitation of the Venezuelan leadership recently. Who knows what Trump has in mind? But in the worst case, this will be the mother of all wars. It will not just set Iran on fire, but Israel on fire. And the U.S. allies, the ones that Donald Trump received gold and pearls and aircraft and money and all the other largesse from in recent times. This could mean a world at war, couldn't it?
They seem intent on violating every principle and pushing across every boundary until we get to a nuclear war. This is the general direction of the world that has been underway for many years. Interestingly, the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists, which keeps the doomsday clock, pushed the second hand of the clock forward 4 more seconds yesterday to say we're all of 85 seconds away from midnight, meaning nuclear Armageddon. That is a reflection of a fact that's been going on since 1992, that every American president has pushed us closer to nuclear war. And that is the case with Clinton, Bush Jr., Obama, Trump 1, Biden, Trump 2. They've all been reckless. And Trump 2 is by far the most unhinged, because there's probably that dementia or psychological profound deficit or instability that's at play right now. But the background to this war that is about to take place is itself a 30-year effort by Israel to create this war. Israel's created just about every other war in the region. It's created the wars in Lebanon, in Syria, in Iraq, in Yemen, in Sudan, because Mossad was very active in breaking apart Sudan, in Somalia, in Libya. It's always wanted the big one. It's always wanted the war with Iran, irrespective of the fact that Iran is essentially 10 times Israel's population. It is not a pushover country. It is not Venezuela. It is not going to be a simple decapitation strike. By the way, neither is Venezuela. Trump does not own or run Venezuela, despite whatever delusions he thinks he has right now. But Iran is not going that way, and it already exists in a cauldron of instability and other nuclear powers. Iran is a region where Russia has major interests, where China has major interests, of course, where the Saudis, where Turkey, where other very significant countries have huge stakes. They actually don't want this war. There is no drumbeat for this war, neither in the American public nor in any countries of the region. This is a drumbeat of war in Netanyahu's mad psyche and in the subservience of the United States to every call by Israel to do Israel's dirty deeds. Trump will attack Iran shortly, unless by some miracle the rest of the world stands up and says, no, you can't do this. We don't accept it. That hasn't happened yet. I think the Security Council should be forced into non-stop sessions. It's not even hypothetical what Trump is doing about violating international law. The UN Charter could not be more explicit. Article 2, Section 4 says that no country may threaten to use force or to use force. And there's Donald Trump chortling along with the threats of force before our eyes. This is flagrantly in violation of the UN Charter. Of course, somebody just quoted to me Chancellor Merz saying how wonderful it is that this regime doesn't have long to live. My God, the astounding recklessness, pathetic governance in Europe to voice these things, just as Europe is poised to receive a U.S. attack anytime in Greenland. It seems that Europe has no principles other than don't attack us, but we'll be pleased if you attack someone else. So this is a real drama. It's a very dangerous situation. It's also amazing to me, frankly, how brazen it is, though at my age, I shouldn't be amazed at brazenness at all, I admit, but I still am amazed at it. And one of the most brazen things, George, I don't know if you caught it, but the Treasury Secretary of the United States proudly describing in Davos last week the maximum pressure campaign by the United States to crush the Iranian economy and thereby to bring people out on the streets. He explained it all, that this wasn't somehow the result of the mismanagement or corruption of the Iranians. This was the deliberate campaign by the Trump administration to crush the economy. And then he concluded at the end, so they're not able to get imports, and this is why the people took to the streets. So this is economic statecraft. No shots fired, and things are moving in a very positive way here, says Bessent. Just incredible. They declared, okay, this is what they consider to be statecraft. This extraordinary violence and deliberate destruction of the economy of another country. And of course, what did Starmer say? What did Merz say? What did Macron say? What did any of these heroes of Western values say? Not a peep, as far as I know.
No. And this is, of course, the exact playbook which brought down the government of Dr. Mossadegh in the 1950s. I mean, right to the rousing of the bazaar on economic demands, which turned out, when we read the histories, when the 50-year rules elapsed, to have been engineered in exactly the same way that Bessent was talking about. Now, look, I respect you very much, but I can't say I respect the organization you advise anymore. I was thinking when you were talking about Olof Palme, everybody then knew who Olof Palme was. Nobody now knows who the Prime Minister of Sweden is. In my lifetime, everybody knew who the Secretary General of the United Nations was. Now, nobody knows who the Secretary General of the United Nations is, and the organization seems to me now otiose, redundant, meaningless. Do you really think there's still a role for the United Nations in this world, this cascading, swirling world that we're living in?
Yeah, I have to answer that in two senses. Is there a role? Should there be a role? Do we need a UN for our survival? And then a predictive answer. Is there really a role in practice? So my view is maybe we're something like 1938 or 39, and we're asking about the League of Nations. And the League of Nations has failed repeatedly in the 1930s. It didn't defend Spanish democracy. It didn't defend Ethiopia. It didn't stop any of Hitler's aggression. And so you would say, what was the point of the League of Nations? And of course, the League of Nations died. It died in the context of World War II, and the United Nations was born because of the death of the League of Nations. It was the successor organization, and had FDR lived, it would have been a very different history. FDR was a great president, one of our very, very few great leaders of the United States, but he was one of them. He died April 12th, 1945, and could not bring the UN to function the way that he envisaged as a cooperative organization. So we are in a very terrible state of affairs with the UN, no doubt. But we need the UN. I fight for it every day. I travel around the world pretty much nonstop. And almost every place in the world, in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, wants a UN that succeeds. Everybody is in despair right now. So everybody is wondering, is it dead? Is it dying? Is it recoverable? But everyone wants the rule of law other than the biggest bully in the world, which is the United States, which says that's a nicety. All that counts is power. We have a thuggish, gangsterish government. But it's not that the whole world is standing up and applauding to gangsterism. They want the rule of law. And my argument is we desperately need it. So with whatever I can do, I'm trying to save the UN. I'm not giving you betting odds on that, but I'm trying my best to say that we need this to function. Look, it's even plausible to say, well, it's dead. It can't function. The U.S. has killed it. It just walked out of 31 UN-based bodies. It's abandoning everything. Yeah, it's true. I can't accept it as being in any way safe, in any way something that is just to be taken as given. We have to fight, international law is definitely fragile. I think it's essential. The whole history of humanity is world wars, but we've never had a world war in the nuclear age, and it'll be the last war that we have, ever, because it'll be the end. So we have to do things that are extraordinary, but it's not easy to do. That's why we need you, George. Really.
Finally, Professor, I say finally, but it's a big subject. I was not happy that Donald Trump was elected president, but I was very happy that Kamala Harris was not. I supported Dr. Jill Stein, but I preferred Trump to Harris because I clung to the hope that at least on the US, NATO, Russia track, Trump would be the less dangerous of the two. I believed him when he said he would bring the Ukraine war to an end. He hopelessly overestimated his ability to do that. 24 hours sometimes, 48 hours other times. But it's been a year now, and we don't yet seem to be bringing the Ukraine war to an end. And whilst World War III might be triggered in the Persian Gulf, in a way, it's still more likely to happen in the NATO-Russia confrontation. What's your reading on the possibility of a negotiated settlement of that war?
Look, this war, first of all, never would have happened had the U.S. Not conspired to overthrow the Yanukovych government in 2014. The war never would have happened had the United States not pushed for NATO enlargement. The war would never have happened had the United States, Germany, and France defended the Minsk II agreement, which is a UN Security Council agreement that would have ended the war through the autonomy of the eastern Ukraine, of the Donbas region. The war could have been avoided as late as December 2021, when President Putin put on the table draft security arrangements with Russia and the United States. And I called the White House, Jake Sullivan, the national security advisor, and essentially begged him for an hour, Jake, negotiate. You don't need NATO enlargement. And he said, don't worry, Jeff, there's not going to be a war. And these people are so incompetent and irresponsible. It's amazing to me. Then a few weeks after the launch of Russia's invasion on February 22nd, we know that they went to the negotiating table with the Turkish mediators. I flew to Ankara to discuss this at length. Of course, the United States and UK, Boris Johnson, in this case, as emissary, broke off the negotiations, told Ukraine, you don't sign, you fight on. That's probably 2 million casualties of Ukrainians since then. This is our great defense of Ukraine, is to kill them all, which seems to be the European and UK strategy. So all of this is to say the grounds for ending this war have been there all along. They are Ukraine's neutrality. This is the essence of it. Stop the stupid NATO enlargement, which was insane to begin with. Some crazy idea of Brzezinski that he learned from Lord Palmerston from 1853, by the way. This is just the Crimean War replayed exactly. Get Russia out of the Black Sea. That was Brzezinski's idea. That was Palmerston and Napoleon III's idea. This has a long pedigree. So this could have ended. When Trump came in, it could have ended had he just stated these principles. Trump is incompetent on top of everything else. He's ignorant. And he's surrounded by the Lindsey Grahams of the world and the Richard Blumenthals. These are people on the pay of the U.S. military-industrial complex. They're warmongers. He's surrounded by the idiocy of Europe that we've talked about. And Zelensky's part of a gang. These are gangsters, as far as I'm concerned. They're not representing the interests of the Ukrainian people. To do that, they would keep Ukraine alive. But no, they don't want to keep Ukraine, or they don't take actions that have the slightest rationality at all. And that's been true for a decade, since the Maidan coup took place. So Trump, were he normal, competent, and capable, would have given a speech to the American people to explain that NATO enlargement was a provocation that was not a good thing. It wasn't worth the effort. It's off the table. And that, therefore, peace can be reached on the terms that were within reach in April 2022. And the United States is going to support that kind of agreement. Trump is incapable of that kind of speech. He's incapable of the kind of peace speech that President John F. Kennedy gave on June 10, 1963, which explained to the American people why we could have a partial nuclear test ban treaty with the Soviet Union. Trump can't do that. And in the meantime, the American military, industrial, digital complex wants to try out drone weaponry, and MI6 wants to weaken Russia and continue the fight. And everybody wants war except the people themselves. And Trump is an incompetent in addition to everything else. I actually think he wants to end the war, but he's incapable of being presidential in the way that would be needed to end the war. And so he really does sway who talks to him the last moment. And his team is incompetent and divided. And Congress is still part of the CIA mix. And the CIA has been trying for this war for 30 years, or it's been trying to bring down Russia and break it apart for more than 30 years. So you need a strong president. And in a way, it comes back to what you said about Kennedy's assassination. No president has shown consequently taking on a peace approach. And Trump falls into line in that way. And maybe he's blackmailed. Maybe it's Epstein. Who knows? But whatever it is, he is not consequent. The war continues, and the tragedy is the Ukrainian leadership, so-called, which I hate to even use the term for it. It's martial law, tiny group doing all of this, and their European buddies are just ready to drag anyone off the streets of Lvov or Odessa or wherever they can find a young man and put him to the front lines to their death. This is what's happening right now. It's utterly tragic.